Before you move to Suffolk County, you need to see these real numbers. Welcome back to the Rivera Report. This is episode 2, the true cost of living in Suffolk County. Do you know the current median home price in Suffolk County is $675,000? I know for some that might surprise you, for some not. Drop a line in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about the current median home price in Suffolk County. All right, let's get right into it. Housing, right? $500,000 used to get you something decent. And these days, $500,000 is getting you something that needs a ton of work, right? And it's definitely not turnkey at $500,000 here in Suffolk County. Taxes may also surprise you, which we'll get into a little bit later. The sweet spot for a turnkey home, something that may need lighter renovations, I would say is about $800,000 currently in Suffolk County. And again, that's something that's a little bit more move-in ready where you're not having to, do a full gut job of the house. Homes are pending in under 21 to 24 days. So that's telling us that we're definitely still in a seller's market here in Suffolk County. And I'm not sure that that changes anytime soon. Until we see inventory start to rise, I think we stay somewhere in that ballpark and we stay in a seller's market. We do really need a lot more inventory to hit the market for us to start to go towards a balanced market and then ultimately into a buyer's market. We'll see what happens over these next 30, 60, 90 days as we trend into the spring and then beyond that into the summer. For those who are renting, right, or looking to rent, currently a 2 bedroom runs you somewhere in the ballpark of about 25 to $3,200 a month on average, which is not terrible compared to where it was. Rents have subsided a little bit, but ultimately it's still a decent number for a 2 bedroom apartment. Let's talk property taxes, right? I did promise you guys that we would get back to property taxes. And this is the big one because a lot of people forget to run the numbers on property taxes and potentially insurance when they are looking at their mortgage payment. So you want to make sure that you understand your monthly property taxes. You want to understand maybe when they were last assessed. Have they been grieved at some point? Because that's also a really important part to that property tax number. Because if they haven't been grieved in a while, chances are you may have a good opportunity of getting them grieved. And property taxes are super important to understand and to know when you are calculating your mortgage payment. A lot of people do forget that aspect. And currently in Suffolk County, our median property tax bill is about $9,472 annually. So it's really important to understand those numbers and to understand if that property tax assessment and that current assessment has been grieved, whether that be recently or in the past. When was the last time those property taxes were grieved? And that number, right, is quite frankly, it's nearly 3 times your national average property tax, which happens to be somewhere in the ballpark of about $3,400 annually. A $500,000 home can run you in the ballpark of about $12,000 a year in property taxes alone. And that's really important to understand. Okay. School district also takes into account your taxes because included in your taxes is typically going to be your school tax, which in a lot of towns within Suffolk County, that accounts for quite the number, right? And quite the percentage of your ultimate property tax, which happens to be on average about 60% or potentially more, depending upon the town in which you are interested in or you live in. rates vary wildly throughout Long Island and Suffolk County in general in terms of your school tax. So it's really important to understand what your school tax ultimately is and what that overall property tax bill, what that breakdown looks like. So ultimately you know what you're paying for every single year within that property tax bill. All right, let's talk about the real monthly breakdown for a family of four that is moving to Suffolk County. Okay. Let's talk about rough numbers. Okay. A mortgage, right? Mortgage payment on a $700,000 home with a current rate of somewhere in the ballpark of about 6.5%, right? You're looking at about approximately about a $3,500 to $3,600 a month payment, right? And that's just principal and interest. So again, it's very important to understand what those numbers look like. Okay. And then if you take property taxes into account, right? So again, your average property tax bill is somewhere around $9,500. So that's about $790 a month in additional property tax. Now, another piece to that, of course, is your homeowner's insurance. You want to understand what that looks like. Average is about $3,000 or so in annual premium here on Long Island, and that's not counting your potential flood insurance. Okay, if you are in a flood zone, you definitely want to talk to your insurance broker, understand exactly what that number could potentially look like. About 25% of Suffolk properties are affected by a potential flood risk. So it's really important for you to understand whether you're in a flood zone, you're not in a flood zone, and if you are in a flood zone, what flood zone are you in, right? Because that's super important when you are going to get your homeowner's insurance and ultimately when you're calculating your mortgage payment and when your loan officer is also calculating your mortgage payment, they're going to take that into your DTI account, right, which stands for your debt to income, right? They want to understand what that looks like. Let's talk about utilities next, right? So utilities in Suffolk County, you're averaging somewhere in the ballpark, I would say between your electric, your gas and or oil, right? And your water, somewhere in the ballpark of about $400 to $500 a month. Okay, and that's on average. That's give or take. Okay, groceries, you're give or take 1,200 to 1,500 a month. Because let's be real, everybody's got to eat, everybody's got to drink, right? Everybody has to live. So you want to make sure that you're also taking that into an account when you're going through and you're budgeting. Okay, transportation. Talked about it last week. You cannot live in Suffolk County if you don't have means of transportation. And typically for a family of four, that means likely two cars. Okay. That's your gas, your insurance, and making sure that if you are commuting, that you also are calculating a potential for your LIRR monthly expense there as well. So I would say that number is somewhere in the ballpark of about 12 to $1,300 a month, which again, you got to make sure that you calculate that when you are budgeting. Total monthly estimate for a family of four, okay, is about $8,500 to $10,000 a month is where you're looking at when you're looking at a real monthly breakdown for that family of four. And that's about 96,000 to about $120,000 annually. And that's again before childcare, dining out, and additional savings, right? That's basically just your cost of living. And now the cost that nobody wants to really talk about and is almost a hidden cost because depending upon when you purchase a home, you may not be thinking of this. And that is heating your home in the winter, especially this winter. This was a pretty brutal winter here in New York and Long Island in general. And you got to understand what that potential utility bill could look like because everybody needs to heat their home, right? And that could be a decent number. So Understand what that budget looks like when you are heating your home. And real talk, Suffolk County, the cost of living here in Suffolk County is 40% higher than your national average. Is it worth it? Listen, there is nothing better than a summer here on Long Island, and there is nothing better than living in a place where you can be at the world's epicenter of New York City within an hour, and then out in the vineyards within another hour. We just have such an amazing accessibility here, which there's truly nothing like it. And is it worth it for families? Absolutely. Remote workers? Absolutely. People wanting quality time and quality space, and then also quality schools? You tell me. Now, I wouldn't suggest it for potentially single earners, people who are maybe non commuters, and people who are on really tight budgets. If you don't like to commute, the city is a great place to live as well. Suffolk County is not for everyone, and that's real talk. Want to know exactly what you can get for your budget out here in Suffolk County? That is exactly what I do. Let's connect. Link in description. You know how to find me. And thanks again for showing up to another episode of the Rivera Report. Next week, episode 3 will be the 3 things real estate agents need to succeed right now.